Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Hanging Out with Nolan Hong. And this week on the podcast is a really special guest. She is a therapist and the owner of Spill the Tea Cafe. And I'm super excited because she's doing a ton of tremendous work out here in our communities here, spreading not only awareness, but education on mental health, but also specifically helping a lot of parents too in dealing with mental health for their children. So I'm just like over the moon that she has found time to talk with me here today, and we're going to get into all kinds of things. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please help me welcome our guest, Miss Haylin Dennison. Haylin, welcome.
Thank you, Nolan.
I've done this for so many months that I was worried that I wouldn't be able to pull up. I always pull up the audience a little too late, so I'm glad that they were here for you to give you your proper respects there.
Thanks so much for having me, Nolan.
Of course. Um, Now, Haylin, before we get into anything, I just have to tell you that I know you through your husband, Alex, and when he was telling me about, what you guys do, I was like, oh, so you have kids? He's like, yeah. And then he explained not only how many children you have, but how old they are. And I was like, wait, I thought you were like 20 something years old. And he's like,
Alex?
no, dude, yeah. And then when I went and looked you up, I was like, holy smokes, your wife looks even younger than you. So
Oh my
I always
goodness.
thought like, I always jokingly, but kind of seriously, was like, oh, children is like the ager, the quick ager for human beings. Like
Oh,
once you
for
have,
sure.
yeah. But then for you guys, apparently it makes you look younger. I don't understand.
Oh, thank you.
What secret fountain of youth did you guys find?
I mean, same to you. You look extremely young. I think that we are definitely aging, and like hair dye and all the things. It definitely helps.
But so you have, was it four children?
We have 4.
Yeah. So what are the ages of your children? Just because I think people are not going to believe this when you tell me.
15, 10, 7, and 4.
Holy smokes. Okay. So aside from what you said, which I don't believe, which hair dye and all that kind of stuff, and genetics, what do you attribute like your guys' kind of secret to keeping healthy as far as not only for yourselves but for your kids too, as being parents of so many children?
Yes, I think, we do have to kind of practice what we preach, and we do try to prioritize our mental health. And, right, like when you're parenting, I think a lot of your own stuff comes up. And so we're definitely challenged by the teenage years, and you have some teenagers too, right? So
Yeah.
I think definitely raising our self awareness and then looking at like what do we need to improve and where do we need to kind of like, not lose our am I allowed to swear on this podcast? I don't
Yes.
want to. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all human, and I am a therapist, but there are definitely days where, we're human and we lose it, and that's okay.
See, I'm so glad that you said that because prior to my journey and working with therapists for myself, I always had this misconception that all therapists, they're therapists because they are experts and they have all their lives put together. And so they're helping me live my life like they do. And then as I started to learn more, I was like, oh, I think a lot of people are therapists because they also have issues, and who better to help me with my issues than someone who actually kind of can relate and understand it and stuff. is that kind of
Absolutely.
is that kind of accurate that a lot of people have this misconception that if you're a therapist, oh, you better have everything in line, and must be the perfect person that knows how to deal with every situation, and that you're perfect parents and all that kind of stuff?
I do think it's a common myth, but we're all human, like I said. And I think it does help though when you have done your own work, it like your own inner work. It does help you, help the patient or client in front of you. And so I think that I have a lot of pride in that. And it's a continuous journey. I have to continuously improve. But absolutely, if we know all the modalities and theories and all the,
Yeah.
fancy terminology, but that doesn't mean that when you have to apply it to yourself or your own kid, that you don't have that emotional charge.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was it about going into this career? Like where did it start for you where you're like, all right, I want to commit my life to this type of work, to mental health and all that?
I think I always had an interest in psychology, early on in my adolescent years. I think I struggled with anxiety, depression, and I was very close to my brother. And he, at a very young age, got into drugs and a car accident, which left him with a traumatic brain injury. And so through that experience, I think watching my brother kind of deteriorate and like his mental health and having kind of like a severe type of mental illness, it always pained me. And I always felt
Mm,
like I wanted to either do something to help. I also struggled a lot in my teen years, and there are a lot of people in my life that helped me come out of that. And so I think it just really made an impression on me. And I also really enjoy the work. I like talking to people. I like introspection and reflection and things like that. And just understanding why we do certain things, I think has always been a passion of mine, or, a sense of like confusion for me. And so I've always had the desire to figure myself out and then also try to help others do the same.
was it difficult in the beginning of your journey before you even decided like, yes, this is something that I want to do to help others? Like you mentioned you had to figure yourself out first. Like was it difficult to make that transition of recognizing that you had things to work on for yourself and then making that transition to, okay, now I have the confidence and desire to help others? Because I gotta that's a huge shift, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think when I started out at a adolescent inpatient like addiction rehabilitation center, but it was specifically for teenagers. And so they lived there. And I would be like a teen mentor on the weekends, and I would come in and, just seeing their struggles. I think they played me a lot. Like
Oh,
they
really?
really made, yeah, they made it really difficult for me. But I think I needed that experience to really, like you said, figure out what it was that I needed to work on. And I guess to answer your question, it was very very difficult, right? And you have to, like, I wanted to strangle them sometimes because they were so naughty. But at the end of the day, that is something that I still do, right? And Spill the Tea Cafe, although it's not an inpatient residential like rehab, I think there's a lot of positive, interactions, and also, I guess, there's a lot of hope instilled in me from that drug rehab, and that was like almost 20 years ago. So
Wow. And so for those listening who are unfamiliar with Spill the Tea Cafe, let's explain what it is and what you're doing there with this awesome, haven for our community.
thank you. Yeah, so I think it really came out of a problem that I had, and we have like a running joke that a lot of the work that I do or the businesses that we have are just a reflection of like my personal problems. But I it's kind of like creating something that I needed, right? And so we were
Mm,
not able to find anything for Matt during the pandemic, and a lot of kids, not just Matt, were struggling with their mental health during the pandemic. And Maddie had a idea to have a mental health clinic or a teen wellness center, but not so sterile, like not like the ones I was sending him to. And he said, Mom, I want to like open up a cafe where, we could have therapy and we could have group therapy, but also it's like fun, and we can have snacks and we can serve boba. And Maddie was saying that that was something that he wanted to do. And he graduated college. And I just told him, like, you don't have to wait. Like, we can do this together. If it's something you want to do, let's do it.
yeah, and when you describe it like that, as far as like what he wanted, it's like, yeah, why hasn't this been thought of before? Like it makes so much sense. But when you think about it, it's like, yeah, there when I think therapy, you just think kind of like, oh, you go into the little office and there's that nice therapeutic music playing and maybe like a little waterfall thing, right? And stuff. But
Right,
uh,
right.
for kids, I don't think like for adults, it's like, oh yes, tranquil, it's peaceful. But for kids, I don't know if that's necessarily, or youth, I guess. Like that's not a natural environment for them. Why do you think it took this long to come up with something? I mean, of course, we needed Matt, but in general, why do you think it's taken society this long to kind of meet? youth where they're at?
I think so many reasons. I'm not sure. You're from Hawaii, Nolan?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Are
yeah.
you?
So yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying too. Like I do think the Asian American community, like Hawaii, not just Hawaii, but I think the Asian culture kind of reinforces a lot of that stigma of like we don't talk about our problems, or if you're going to therapy then something must be wrong with you or you're crazy, or
Yeah,
when we're little, for people who are local they're going to get this joke, but it's always like, oh, you're so crazy, you better go kahi mohala, right? Like there's
yeah, yeah,
always that kind of stigma surrounding it. And I think it's embarrassing for a lot of kids to go to therapy. And it's exactly what you described. You go and you like wait in this waiting room, and then there's like the awkward silence, and you're like
yeah.
wondering what's wrong with all these people. But really, nothing is wrong with us, right? I do think everyone can benefit from therapy. And I think it's this misconception. And so we are really out here trying to break the stigma and trying to create a space that doesn't feel like that, right? Like there's kids in here playing foosball or playing the PS5. Like it's, you're not just in here for therapy. Sometimes you're just in here just to hang out.
And I think that's also beneficial and helpful to their mental health, wellness. Is just not it's not just always having therapy, it's having connections and having a safe space to be yourself. That's, I have to imagine, is a key part of I don't want to say the healing, because or I guess in supporting of their mental health journey, right?
Right. I mean, I think it's vital, especially in the teen years or in adolescence, right? Like we all need inclusivity and belonging, or we all need to connect, even from a primal standpoint, right? Like that is just, even when we were cavemen, that was part of survival to be a part of a tribe. But I think
Hmm.
specifically in adolescence, it's really crucial for the psychological development for um, our kids or our teenagers to be a part of a group, right? And so I think we try to specifically, obviously it's for all teens, and so we have majority of the kids right now here, they are cisgendered and straight, but we want to make sure that kids of the LGBTQI plus community, which Matt is a part of, we want to make sure that there's no question that we are a safe space and that we are inclusive. And so we do make sure that we take a trauma informed lens, and we are um, very understanding of the unique challenges that these kids come to us with. And we definitely want to celebrate them instead of, kind of what they're used to, which is bullied or, just comments or people staring at them or people calling them names. And then also people telling them to go to hell, or that they are going to go to hell, things like that, that
Yeah.
can really mess with their development.
Uh, as much as I think everything about Spill the Tea Cafe sounds perfect, I imagine that there may be either some youth or even their parents that might, prior to coming, have concerns with.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
is, are there any things that kind of pop up usually that you are approached with, and if so, like what kind of things, I guess, assurances can people know about it that might be helpful for them to know and understand prior to coming and checking you guys out?
I think a lot of parents unintentionally put, expectations on their kids and pressure. I also think
Mm,
that kids nowadays, they just have that internal pressure, maybe from kids at school or even from what they see on social media. But I would say the biggest thing, or, one of the biggest challenges is that parents are not supportive, and parents do feel like this is just a trend or this is just a phase, or
yeah,
my child is just trying to get attention. And so those kind of things can unintentionally hurt or exacerbate the symptoms that the kids are going through. But I would, I am the first to tell parents and everyone that I was there as well. And I also had a very difficult time accepting Maddie. Um, it was a journey for me. Even though I'm a therapist, you would expect me to be open and supportive and affirming. And I thought I was, but in actuality, I was just ambivalent and I was just avoidant of the whole thing. And a lot of that comes from my background and my programming and my upbringing. And so I was, just like a typical local family, I was raised extremely Christian. And, I do believe in God. And I also believe that I want my child alive. And I think that what's most important to me is to have an actual authentic relationship with my child, with all of them. And I want to be able to listen, and I want to understand where Matt's coming from, which is that he is his own person. And although like these kids are born through me, and I'm so honored that I've been able to like birth them, they don't, I don't own them, right? So they're born like through me, but they're not mine. And they're not just here to please me and to be whatever I want them to be. And so um I think the breaking point for me was when Maddie was going to church one day and had like a pride shirt on, and I typically would allow him to wear that. I think he might have been in the 5th grade at that time. Now he's in the 9th grade, but I told him to take that shirt off and that I'm not trying to deal with any drama. And really, I didn't want Maddie to deal with family members. I also didn't want to deal with my parents because I knew I would probably get some,
Mm.
messaging about that. And Maddie just told me that he felt like I was embarrassed of him or parts of him, and he asked me if I was ashamed of him. And I think in that moment, I really had to look at myself, and that was the last thing that I actually felt from my child. I mean, Maddie has always been just my. I always tell Maddie, like, we have this special connection since the moment you were born. And Maddie's like, I don't feel the connection, mom. Like, but like Maddie is my world, and for him to feel that way, it pretty much broke me, and I had to really be the mom that I was supposed to be, that I wanted to be, that I was destined to be. And so that's when I had to like throw myself into the research and get all these like consultations. And from that, I'm just so glad like we've been able to hook up with Stanford Med, and they have like a gender affirming clinic up in Stanford. And so we're able to work with them alongside JABSOM here and really try to elevate the gender affirming care that we have here in Hawaii. And again, it's a lot easier to listen to an endocrinologist from Stanford than, say compared to my best friend's opinion, or,
Mhm.
the person on the street, or my mom or my dad. It's a lot more reassuring, and I think it helped me a lot. And I also want to help other parents do the same because I see my child thriving. Um, and I believe that they all have such special gifts, and I really want to celebrate all of the kids in this community. I don't want it to be like what we see on the media where it's like, oh, these kids are just on drugs, or they're just having mental problems and they're homeless, and they're, yes, I understand that. But also, we're not looking at the reasons for this, right? We're not looking at the reasons for their mental health decompensating. Like 50% of all trans kids in Hawaii last year attempted suicide. That's an alarming rate. And in 2019, specifically Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders, suicide was the number one leading cause of death, reported by SAMHSA in 2019. And that is unheard of, and it's, I think, so heartbreaking. I feel like we cannot deny the fact that these kids feel alone. They feel like they don't belong. They have to face discrimination at home, even in the school, the church, the community, sports, right? There's a lot. And I think that was really what was super hard for me as a mom, was that I knew that my kid was going to have a harder life than most.
And do you, is that pretty much what the source of what came across at that time as not being proud of him? It was actually more out of, not that you weren't proud, but you were fearful and wanting to protect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. I think, I couldn't have said it better. Is really about that fear and also the reality of it. And so we are here to try to change that. And I feel like I make a joke that like, I love this work, but I feel like I didn't choose it. I feel like it chose me.
Yeah.
And,
I feel like
and,
that's a rap song.
right, right. And so I am able to connect with parents and say, I'm right there with you. And I also will say I get extremely frustrated with parents because I know that in order to help the kid, I have to help the parents. But I mean, parents have to also engage in their own therapy and like understand a lot. It's like a whole new world, right? We have to learn so much about this stuff because I am not trans. I am not part of the LGBTQI plus community. So therefore, I also need to, make that commitment to learn about it. And I think a lot of parents, just like myself, we feel like we don't have the time. We feel like we'd rather not deal with this right now because of,
Mhm.
just working. All of us in Hawaii, right? We have like two or more jobs. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot going on. We're raising kids. We're trying to, get through the pandemic, so many things. And so I understand where the parents are coming from, but also the statistics of the suicide rate, I believe should make a difference in your opinion or in your
Yeah.
thought process.
How much of it, I mean, I know everybody's different and every situation is different, but I'd be curious to find out how much it is normal that when there are situations like this for parents, that the most I guess the best way for success for them as parents and for their children has a lot to do with the parent getting therapy for themselves. For it's just not just so let me learn so I can help my child, but that it turns out they actually need a lot of help themselves too, and that was a huge part in the success of kind of bridging that gap and creating that closer bond between them too. Is it, do you notice that there's kind of a link to that at all?
Absolutely. I think that anyone can benefit from therapy, right? And I'm not saying everyone has to go to therapy, but I do
Right.
think that therapy is a place where, you know, we have hard conversations, right? And we have conversations that no one taught us to have. And what that means is that, if you're not in therapy and maybe you do other things, and that's okay too. Like it can just be therapeutic. It doesn't have to be actual therapy. But what I'm saying is the most important thing is to have these conversations with your child. And a lot of people, I would say majority of parents, are not having the conversation with their child.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you explained kind of your background as well, because I feel like that's probably very common for a lot of parents in that they come from, a strict upbringing themselves, and they have a family that might not be as accepting and such. And so having the weight of that on top of whatever that parent's own personal opinions just compounds the difficulty of having these kind of conversations and understanding of their children and such. Um, so for you in your experience, what do you think was the most? I mean, there's so much work that you did, but was there something in particular that really helped you make that transition from having this upbringing of like strict religious background, the concern of the judgment of your family and such, to be able to change that, to take away, I guess, that barrier between you and your child?
Yeah, and I think that it really was my own therapy, getting
Mm,
into my own therapy and understanding where this fear was coming from, and understanding that I could choose to work at like building this relationship with my child. And it's not only for my child, but it's also for me to feel confident in my child's future, because I think that is one thing that kept me stuck, is that just was so afraid of, I mean, if you look at just what's happening in the world right now, like I don't
yeah.
want my child to be a victim to those kind of things. And so I think Maddie, although I'm saying therapy, I have to say it's Maddie who helped me look at myself. And I think because Maddie went through a lot, and I try to be very careful because I understand that it's Maddie's story to tell. And I try to
Mm,
just say my side of the story or from my perspective. But I will say that Maddie held in a lot. And I will also say that Maddie suffered a lot in terms of, people and their opinions and bullying and things like that. And so if Maddie could withstand all that and then still say that he wants to be true to himself, then I also wanted to do that with him. And I wanted to be there for him. And I didn't want to, shut him out or ignore him. And I wanted him to feel seen and heard. And so I had to do that as well, right? So I have to
mhm.
also say, do I care what other people think? Yes, I do. But can I, in the effort to prioritize the relationship with my child, can I put that on the back burner?
Yeah.
And so that has really helped me and shaped me into who I am today. And I really do feel stronger than ever, you know, and that doesn't come with, I mean, that doesn't mean it's perfect. And of course it still comes with stress, and people
Mhm.
are going to have their opinions, and we do get a lot of hate, right? But we also get letters from parents saying you saved my kid's life, and we have kids writing us letters, and of the, you know, just to see all the kids in the cafe and to hear them say that, hey, I was hospitalized 5 times before this, and this is the longest I've ever gone without self-harming, and this is, you know, this place I finally found another kid who's just like me. I think it reminds me of just why we have to continue doing this work even when it is
Yeah.
hard.
If you could go back in time prior to the work that you did on yourself, when you were at that point where you were hoping that Maddie would not, like, you're worried about his safety, and that was the reason why you um, felt the way you did. What, in that version of you, what would you have thought was the right strategy for him to stay safe? Was it that you would just want him to seek out not being who he was, or just tone it down, or like what was it that at the time that you thought, if you could just do this, then you can be safe and we don't have drama, and like what? And I ask this only because I feel like maybe other parents might be at that point now, and I just want to maybe see if there was any kind of thought process at the time prior to you doing the work, that you thought, yeah, if it could only just be this, then this will make it all okay.
Yeah, I think I was very much like, oh, never mind. Like, you don't need to worry about that. Like, don't even talk about that. Like, you're too young,
Uh,
right? Right. And
uh,
then Maddie would ask to cut his hair short for like 5 years, and we would say no. I'm like, oh my God, you're so pretty. Like, I would say all the things that were the classic, like stereotypical, which I'm very embarrassed and like have a lot of guilt about. But that is how I felt. And then um, my ex-husband, so the three are from my ex, and then the 4-year-old is from my second marriage. And so, you know, we all three of us have evolved as a family. And my ex and I, you know, we co-parent well, but he also is very, you know, traditional and very masculine, like brada brada, you know, like.
mm,
And so I remember he and I would kind of agree on this, like Maddie shouldn't have to talk about this stuff, right? Or he's like,
mm.
you know, tell Maddie that it ain't no like protest. Like, you don't got to wear those shirts everywhere, right?
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
didn't understand.
uh,
What we didn't understand was that Maddie was trying to express what was going on inside,
yeah.
and I think was trying to test who would still accept him and who was safe to talk to about this, right? Because if you put on a pride shirt, you don't have to say anything, but you'll
Mhm.
know who's giving you the dirty looks, right? And you'll know, like.
Right.
And so I think, again, I'm right there with you. I don't judge anybody. I think I was pretty bad in terms of trying to accept Maddie. But I do feel like I'm redeeming myself. And I definitely feel like I'm a better version of myself now for Matt and for the rest of the kids too.
But isn't that kind of like our, like everybody's journey is, like, we're always growing and learning, and like without looking at what we've done in the past, like I think everybody on all different types of levels kind of like, oh, if I could go back and do this, but have we not gone through that, you know it wouldn't have led, like, I'm a huge fan of like the Back to the Future movies, and it's like,
Right.
oh, if you go back and change and alter the past, it changes the trajectory of the future. So um have you figured out how to, I guess, be more forgiving of yourself? Like Maddie has forgiven you, but I think probably the harshest critic would be you criticizing yourself. What
A
have
hundred
you
percent.
learned
Yes.
to try to help be more forgiving of yourself?
Yeah. And I think that is the inner work, right? That we do,
Yeah.
understanding who that inner critic is and where they come from, right? Because sometimes it could be like a teacher's voice, or like, I don't know, a grandparent's voice or your parents' voice. And it really stems from childhood. And so, like, trying to be the perfect X, Y, and Z, trying to get straight A's, trying to, be an overachiever. I think those things are amazing. I also have a whole group of kids in our support group for academic stress where they have straight A's and they're also suicidal. And so that's
Mm,
not okay with me, right? Like those kind of statistics have to change. And I think in the pursuit of being perfect, or the pressure of succeeding and what that looks like today, uh I'm no different, right? And so just being able to say I am human, I am learning, I'm evolving, I'm able to look at my past beliefs and I'm able to change that, right, based on new information. It is about evolution. And I think the doctors at Stanford really helped me because they're like, I understand your concerns, right? There's different types of parents, and for parents like me, I probably have done an unhealthy amount of research, right, on this topic. And so it's nice when doctor says, hey, I understand your concerns. I understand your fears. I also have seen 800 kids exactly like Maddie this year. And so
oh,
here's what my experience has been, right? And
wow.
so I think that has really helped me. And I'm not an expert or anything, but I definitely can share with parents what I've been taught as well.
Yeah. And I was curious that with all of the uh you mentioned like, oh, a lot of it comes from, your childhood and such, and that's what I've learned in my journey. It's like, oh, so much of what I'm dealing with now, it all stems from my childhood. And I always, prior to this, thought like, yeah, that was when I was a little kid. I'm different now, like, why should that bother me? But it's so amazing how I'm recognizing that so much of me is still tied to, 2, 3, 4-year-old version of me. But with that understanding, now I'm freaking out even more as a parent, because I'm like, am I screwing up the kids for life? Like, and so then I'm so much more like sensitive to and critical of myself as a parent. But then I feel like when I do that, then I'm also being a bad parent, because then now I'm, so it's like, what is your take on it? Is it you just gotta like understand, yep, this is part of human life. Like the childhood, no matter what, is gonna be difficult and have its challenges and ups and downs. And all you gotta do is work on yourself, like what you explained. And if you can be the best version of you, then that's the best way to parent. Like, what is your thoughts on that? Because that's something I struggle with for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely struggle with that as well. I think I am hypersensitive, right, to parenting. And when you're in this profession, you kind of know all the worst case scenarios and you don't want that to happen to your child. So I understand that. I also think that every generation before us, right, has, like, how should I say this? I think that now we're in a space where mental health is more accepted, or kids nowadays, they understand that mental health is important, right? Whereas maybe
Hmm.
my grandparents don't really think it's as important, or maybe like,
Yeah.
right, like our parents, that type of thing. And so I have a joke that no matter how much I research and do all the parenting, I guess tips or parenting hacks, our kids are still going to be like a new type of messed up, like a new level of messed up.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's okay. But it like they'll have the baseline, meaning that they know they're accepted, at least they know that they're
Hmm.
loved unconditionally. And also, when I make a mistake, I think a big thing I tell parents, and I definitely do this very often, is I will apologize. I will say, hey, I was not in control of my emotions. I did not mean to yell at you like that. I am sorry, and I need, I really want you to forgive mom, and I'm working on that, right? And so that is something that, and to no fault of their own, but our parents and grandparents, I don't think it was a thing where you go and like apologize to your kids. But
Yeah.
modeling that behavior, I think, so you don't have so much shame. Like sometimes people are so ashamed to say sorry. Like we all know a person who's like never said sorry to you in your life, and you're like, have
Yeah.
you never made a mistake ever? But also it does reinforce for the kids, because those kids that I'm talking about, the ones that are like straight A's and suicidal, right? I also work with med students and physicians for about 7 years now. And I really have a passion for that because I've worked in suicide prevention for so long, and suicide also impacts physicians and med students. And I don't know if a lot of people know that. But what I was trying to say is that these kids who are getting straight A's and like suicidal, they become the med students and they become the doctors. And it's like,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
still this huge stigma around it. And so I still think that even though we're so much more aware of mental health, and Gen Z, they are really open to coming to therapy, it is still a huge issue that nobody talks about, especially in medicine and especially in like academic kind of institutions.
Yeah. Uh, Regarding the apologizing to your children, like that's something that I've been doing, but maybe you can help me understand it more, because one of my concerns is that when I do that, I'm like, of course, my parents didn't do that with me, so I'm like, am I doing something wrong by like showing
Right.
weakness or vulnerability, or am I bringing myself down and I'm no longer the authority and the parent, and I'm down, we're on the same level, and is that bad? um what is there something that you have to I guess help me understand like I'm doing a good thing by doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should overly apologize or anything like that, but I just feel like if we show up in a way that like we're not proud of, I think it's good to just address it and not pretend like it didn't happen. Like, maybe you're a little too harsh with your kid, or maybe, and it doesn't mean that what they did is okay. It's just saying like, I could have handled that better. And when you model that, right, like we all know that kids, they don't they don't do, it's like, oh, do what I say, not what I
Yeah.
do. But
Yeah,
kids are
yeah.
going to absorb a lot of the behaviors. A lot of
Mm,
times when I see an anxious kid, it's like, I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but a lot of times, really, in my practice, if I see a highly, highly anxious kid, there is a highly anxious parent.
hmm. When for you, when you're growing up, you said that part of what inspired you to take this journey into making this your life and career. What you said, you went through a lot of issues. Like, what were some of those things that I guess laid the foundation for this?
Like some of my own struggles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think my family, honestly, has a history of mental health, issues, depression, anxiety, um, a lot of it untreated, right? A lot of it not
Yeah.
really recognized. And so growing up, there was a lot of chaos and just a lot of maybe emotions not really talked about, or emotions not, people not really knowing how to handle those emotions or how to regulate those emotions. And so what happened to me as a child, I think, is that it kind of activated my central nervous system, where I would be hyper vigilant to, or hypersensitive to, everyone's mood, and I would try to do things to
Mm,
de-escalate, people, or I would try to behave in a way that like wouldn't escalate people. And what that does to someone is that, back in our primal days, again, like when we are in the cave, that autonomic response or fight or flight was activated to make sure that we could survive, right? Like if we wouldn't get eaten by a lion. And
yeah.
all of our, when that activates, all of our other, bodily functions will shut down so that everything can go towards survival. For
Hmm.
instance, like our libido will shut down, of course, our digestion, right? We're not worried about eating in that moment. We're just worried
Yeah.
about survival. But the way that technology has advanced and our brains have not like caught up yet,
Mm.
now I have that feeling, or you have that feeling, if there's a bad email, or if you haven't,
Yeah.
if you didn't get an A on your test, right? And so we haven't caught up. And if your body is in that fight or flight state for too long, you will see your body shutting down and or getting sick and or getting autoimmune diseases.
I wish I had talked to you a lot sooner in my life, because you just kind of described me. So it's interesting that that's what your kind of your journey been, and I gotta probably assume that a lot of people who suffer from anxiety and depression kind of have similar experiences too.
Right.
Um,
So I have to always tell myself like, this helped me, and I don't know if it's going to help you, but I want to share it. It's like
yeah,
I have to tell myself it's not a fire. It feels like a fire. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I have all these crisis patients and it is, but
yeah,
you know my therapist will say, like, but is it an actual fire? Like, your life is in danger? And then I'll say it's not, right? And so things like that, it's a perceived threat, it's not an actual threat. But because my neural pathways are automated from childhood, we have to work really hard to change those automations, and we have to actually change our thinking. And that takes practice, which is so frustrating because it takes too long, right? In my
Yeah.
opinion, it takes so long to catch that thought distortion, change it, right? And then be able to calm your body down.
Yeah, for me, it's I have this perception of like I don't have time to process it. But what I realized is by not processing it, I'm adding so much more time because I'm going through in my head like all the different crazy scenarios
Right.
and advancing into like imaginary situations when I could have just taken that time to go, hey, wait, let me just look at this and like you said, like, is it a fire? Like, no. Oh, well, then I'm not going to put my energy to that thought anymore.
Right.
But instead, I
Right.
just go straight to like, again, my Back to the Future of passion is like I go into the future, like what could happen. I go through like all the different scenarios, and I wasted so much of that time and energy on things that never happen or probably never will happen.
And also in those moments, which I share right alongside you, is that our cortisol, right, the stress hormone, will also like increase and cause all this inflammation. And so if you have any kind of physical health issues, right, that's going to always exacerbate it. But I do think it's important for us to recognize that those are thought distortions, and thought distortions are, it's not like a hallucination or a delusion, but it's still like a baby form of that. And you really believe those thoughts, but those thoughts are, for instance, catastrophic thoughts.
Hmm.
It's not likely it will happen. But
Yeah.
imagine having all these catastrophic thoughts where you're like going to the worst case scenario. What is that doing for your cortisol? What is that doing for your stress level? So, like you said, if you're up all night thinking about the worst case scenario, like for instance, if I was thinking about the worst things that could happen to Maddie all night long, what is that going to do to me? Right.
Yeah. And so with that, I mean, are you seeing, because I think for the longest time we have always dealt with health issues like individually, like, oh, headache, take this pill. Got high cholesterol, take this pill. Like all these medications to deal with that singular issue. And it always feels like the older you get, like the more issues you get piled on. And then you see
Right.
all these older people with like giant pill boxes of all these different medications. But from what you're saying, it sounds like that if we go and nip it at the source, when that mental health issues can leak into spreading into all of these things because physiologically your body's like shutting down functions because of its perceived threat, that if
Right.
we can go start from the base, then we don't have to deal with all of these individual issues, right?
Right. Right. And I think exactly. And I think that we are so scared, right, of our feelings. We're
Mm-hmm.
we're avoiding it at all costs. Like
Yeah.
even just an uncomfortable feeling or a discomfort, right? We want to avoid it at all costs. And our feelings can't kill us. Although they're super uncomfortable and sometimes anxiety provoking, they can't kill us. But the things that we do to avoid our feelings, that stuff can kill us, right? The stuff that we're using to numb out, the things that we're using to avoid, those things can kill us. And I think it's important for us to realize that so that we take the step forward. We know it's going to be uncomfortable, but we're still going to do it. We're still going to talk about it.
How do you see, based on like what you're seeing out, in the community and in your world, it playing out? Because on one hand, I feel like, yeah, the more we can feel comfortable sharing and being honest and open, the healthier it is. But then I can also imagine that there's people who take it too far in the other direction of like, I need to tell you, and it's not reciprocated where they're open and being sensitive to others, and it's they perceive it more of a, if you're not gonna respect my feelings and opinions, then like you're the problem, and it creates that divide. Whereas I think intentional initially it was encouraged to open so that we can create more of a connection. Is that, do you think that, you from what you've seen, that there's any kind of observations that you see in how we're dealing with people being more open and sharing?
Are you saying that like people might not agree with you or your belief systems?
I
And
think.
that
Yeah,
could
because
create that could create conflict between like family members, like that kind of thing, or
yeah, because I mean, I think now that it seems like before we just didn't talk as much, like, right? Like
right.
we just didn't talk about it, and then you assume, oh, everything's fine, but actually, what we're seeing is because we all kept it in, it created a lot of problems for ourselves. And so, if the solution is to start to get comfortable with opening up and sharing more, that helps you with yourself. Does that have you seen? Does that create more problems now because others now have to, I guess, respect and deal with
I see what you're
each
saying.
other's
Yes,
feet,
you're
right?
saying like, yeah, so when as we become more self-aware, then we start
Hmm.
creating boundaries, right? Like healthy boundaries for ourselves, and those boundaries impact the people around us.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the most important thing, which is I also think is the hardest thing, number one, is to be when I mean like be open and talk about it, I'm primarily saying like yourself. Like, are you able to talk? Are you able to admit
Mm,
to yourself, right? Like I can't be open with you if I'm not open with myself first,
got it.
right? Like
Yeah.
I can't admit, like I couldn't say, for the longest time, it's really hard for me to say like my child is trans. Like I couldn't. So I had to say it to myself before I can say, hey, Nolan, my kid is trans, right?
Mm, yeah.
So I think that's the hard part. Like that's the work where you're admitting to yourself what you're struggling with, right? Because we like to say, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine. Like nothing's
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
When in reality, that is repressed. And so because it's repressed, you might be hypersensitive. Everybody has blind spots, right? Like, um, for instance, we all lose it sometimes. But because of my childhood, I'm hypersensitive to yelling. And so if anyone yells,
Mm,
I have less patience for them when I have to remind myself, okay, everyone makes mistakes and this is not the same experience, right, that I went through.
yeah. That's a lot to process.
Yeah, it is.
I'm surprised that you're still awake at this far. I I'm going to ask you this because I feel like you and I probably have similar experiences with growing up in strict religious households. But I understand this could be a sensitive topic. So if it is something you don't want to dive into, I totally understand. But I'm just curious about your opinion on this. And what we've been talking about here is that you've explained how important it is for us to recognize the things that we're struggling with and have that open conversation, not only with ourselves but also with those around us, and kind of owning the things that we're dealing with. And what I learned when in growing up in a strict Christian household is like you don't deal with it. Well, this was my young perception of it. So anybody listening who's going to criticize this is young me. I'm talking is that you don't have to deal with any of the issues. You just give it up to God and let Him deal with it. And if it's something that you can't deal with and that He hasn't helped you with, it's because you aren't doing something right. Like you're not praying hard enough, or you're not right with your walk and such. But I noticed that it could be so powerful from what I saw for a lot of people to kind of release that stress and release that hold of whatever issues are bothering, because they would just say, well, I just gave it up to God and my faith in that will carry me through. Does But now in this conversation with you, I'm thinking like that could be kind of detrimental to their mental health, right? Because if they're not, because that's not allowing them to have that open conversation with themselves and such, because they're just kind of chucking it off to something else, whether it's God or something else. It doesn't even have to be Christianity. Is that a what do you say to that? Is that kind of something that is a reality of issue, or am I thinking far too deeply into this?
No, it's absolutely valid, and I think I grew up that way too, and I like to say both and, right? So a lot of times we have this
Mm,
black and white thinking where it's like, and a lot of this also comes from religion. Again, it's not bad, but it is considered a thought distortion. If everything is black or white, right or wrong, just I guess always or never, like those kind of words, it is considered black and white thinking. And so I like to say both and. So I think it's important. I really believe in faith-based support and community, and some of my best friends, right? My whole family, I love them so much. We're Christian. And I think you can give up your problems to God, and you can also do things that can help yourself and also help create some change in your life, right? Like, for instance, if I say, I mean, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but I am also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse in the church. And so the reason I share this with you is because I've been through many years of therapy, and that's the reason I can talk about it. But for
Hmm.
instance, if I say, okay, well, I'm just going to give this to God, right?
Yeah.
That's okay. And I think, yes, I had to do that. And also, it's important that the people around me, as a child, it's important that they should have advocated for me, or there should have been like charges pressed, or there should have been
Yeah.
some kind of, right. And so, yes, we give it up to God, and also we do what is needed in order to live to our fullest potential, in order to make sure that our kids are safe. We also do things to live in our most authentic way, even if that's not the same as somebody else. So it's like
Right.
we only have this one life, and the life has to be lived on my terms.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's interesting that you said that you could only share this now because you did go through the work. And
Right.
um can you explain the power behind being able to share something traumatic like that, that some many would say, oh, that's so traumatic that I would never want to say it out loud, because it just, like, why bring it up again? But I
Right.
sensed when you said it, it's like there's so much power in it now for you. Can you explain a little bit about how that changed for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the power of therapy, right, is not, you don't just go somewhere and talk about all your problems and then just be all depressed, right? When you do the therapy, you realize that a lot of the shame and guilt surrounding some of your challenges or some of your depression, that naturally resolves because you can talk about it in a way that makes sense to you. So the reason that trauma is so hard is because it doesn't make sense, right? And we are shaken out of our reality. And I think when you have someone in the therapy room who's able to see you and listen to you in a way that is kind of like reflecting a mirror back to you, you kind
Hmm.
of understand, oh, why react this way, or why I, am automatic with these thoughts, or why I'm so hard on myself in these ways, right? Or even something as simple as, oh, okay, now I understand why I would never let my kids go to a sleepover. Like, right, like there's all these things that
Mm.
you understand. It's, instead of me questioning what's wrong with me, I was then able to question like what's wrong with the system, or what's wrong with, some of these things where I think our parents were really in survival mode, and
Yeah.
so I don't blame them. I think that they are a product of their own upbringing, right? And so that's why I think it's not black and white. Like, I don't like when the kids come in here and only talk about the negative things about their parents. And it's okay, I allow them to, but I always ask them to have 1% hope that they can get better, even if it's not with their parents, because I don't want this place to be a place of just darkness and depression. Like, we're here to get better and to
Hmm.
thrive. And so um, I think it's important for the kids to also know that their parents are trying. They might not get there as fast as the kids want them to, but I also try to make sure the kids are very respectful to their parents. And I say, you can say whatever you want, but it has to be respectful.
Mm. I I really appreciate you. I figured as we're talking about this, I'm like coming up with so many other questions, and wanting to talk more. And I'm like, you must be so tired about talking about this topic, because I mean, this is your whole world, and that's all you talk about. I'm like, I hope I'm like not making you be like, can we talk about like what my favorite, boba tea flavor is for
No,
lunch?
no, no. And actually, I didn't even answer your question. But so yeah. So going back to the childhood abuse, I think
Yeah,
when I'm sharing that, I know that it's powerful because I know that I don't, like, if this was 15 years ago or something, I would not be able to talk about it, right? I would probably be activated in fight or flight. I would probably be, right? Like, I had a lot of PTSD symptoms. And so
yeah.
I think being able to talk about it without that emotional charge, I want to give others hope that and it's not even that you would go out and talk about it, but for me, I talk about it because I'm showing you and also like your listeners or anyone who's struggling that um it's okay to think about, and it's okay to process these emotions if something has happened to you, and it's okay to feel the way that you feel. But when I talk to you all, it is also a way that I can show you that I trust you, right? And then if you
Yeah.
trust, if I trust you, and then you might trust me, and then we'll build a connection. I think that that benefits everyone. And so I try, in therapy, we're really trained not to self-disclose, and I don't. However, when it will be beneficial for the patient in front of me, I do self-disclose, because that
Hmm.
does also give a genuine connection. And it does allow space and safety for the other person to also self-disclose. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Or
Absolutely. And
okay,
I experienced that with my current therapist. And I think that's why I've had such great strides in my mental health journey in the
nice.
last several years of working with her, is because we established from the beginning that our relationship was going to be one of like, where it's a two. I mean, of course, she's still the therapist and such, but by her disclosing things of her experiences, it did bridge a huge gap and build a lot of trust and
And
comfort
it
for
feels more
me.
like a team, right? It's not like
Yeah,
a, oh, you're the authority figure, which I think a lot of teenagers struggle with. So I do like
yeah,
to let them know, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I am the perfect angel and I've never done anything that they're doing. Like I say, and try to, again, if it benefits them, I try to explain, like, yeah, I'm not judging you for that. Like, I understand why you would do something like that.
yeah. Because I would think that was the biggest thing that I struggled with, even as an adult, was the fear and dealing with judgment. And
Right.
if I was to go to a therapist, and it's that would probably be where I would feel most vulnerable to judgment. So to have an environment where it's like, no, no judgment, like I'm just,
Yes.
like you, it's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I and I wanted to make sure, because I've had friends who've come up to me after I've been open about my mental health journey and going to therapy and such, and they had shared like, yeah, that's so awesome that you had that experience, but I tried therapy, it didn't work for me, and I tried medication and it was bad and didn't work for me, and so they write off
Yeah.
therapy as just not something for them, and I try to explain to them that it's not that every therapist relationship is going to work out and that every therapist is perfect for you and that you're the problem, that you're not good for therapy. I think it's just a matter of finding the right fit. Just like when you're out buying a car, not every single car make and model is going to be an ideal fit for you and your needs. Like you got to find the one that is going to match what you need. um and
Right.
so
And I,
from
yeah,
your
I,
perspective,
mhm.
yeah, what
Yeah,
would
no,
you
I
say to those
agree.
who worry about that or think that?
I get that a lot too. I think
Yeah.
that just like any profession, well, what's really hard too is right now there's a shortage of therapists, like not only in Hawaii, but
Yeah, I've
across the
heard that.
nation. So I know that that is a real access problem. I
Mhm.
also think that like any profession, right? Like all therapists are not created equal, and the research is really clear about this, that it actually doesn't matter about the degree or the modality or the type of license that therapist has. What really matters is what we call the therapeutic alliance, meaning that you like and trust your therapist. So if you like and trust your therapist, then
Mm.
that would be a good fit. If you don't, then I also want to normalize that it does. Like for me, it took me a lot of therapists before I found one that was a good
Oh,
fit.
really?
And yeah, and I also tell the kiddos too here, like, or the teenagers, I'm like, if you guys go to Domino's and then you don't like their pizza, it doesn't mean that you're gonna be like, oh, I'm never gonna eat pizza again. You're probably gonna go to Pizza
Yeah.
Hut and Papa John's. Like, just go to somewhere else, or like if you're trying to find a dentist or OB or whatever, like you're gonna go through some until you find, oh, I really like this one. And so I need you guys to also have that same kind of flexibility for when you're finding a therapist, because it is potentially a long-term relationship with that person. And you don't want to keep repeating your story over and over, right? Like midway. So
Yeah.
it's important to pick the right one in the beginning.
That was what was the biggest deterrent for me to find a new therapist, because I had been going
Yeah.
to my therapist for probably over a decade, and it had hit the point where it, I wasn't getting the results or the
Growing.
support
Yeah,
I need.
yeah.
Yeah. And so my wife, she could see that, and she kept saying like, you guys find a new therapist. Like, this isn't doing anything for you. And I'm like, in my head, I was like, no, no, the problem is me.
Yeah.
Like, I just gotta like try harder, like,
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
just couldn't imagine starting all over like 10 years, 20 years of work, starting from square one. And I was like, my story is so complex and deep. It's gonna take me months to like explain it all to a new therapist. And then
Right.
what if they're not even the right one? And I actually did go to a second one, and it wasn't the right fit, and it was
Mhm.
discouraging for me, where I was like, oh, see, this is why I don't want to get, I just go back to my old one kind of thing.
Right, right.
Um, but thankfully, my wife convinced me, and I tried another one, and that one worked out fantastically, and it's been a huge
Yeah.
game changer for me. So yeah,
I'm
I'm
I love
thankful
to
that you
hear
shared
it.
that.
Yeah, I love to hear it.
Yeah,
And also, like, sometimes I just say, fresh eyes. Sometimes you just need fresh eyes. Maybe nothing's wrong with that therapist, but if
right.
yeah, I definitely feel like if you've been going to them for like a whole decade, I think fresh eyes is good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and is that a real thing? Like that maybe sometimes there's a shelf life on a patient therapist
I
relationship?
think, all therapists will probably answer this question differently, but for
Oh,
me,
okay.
I really am like my work centers around making positive change. And so for me, it's like we do have goals and there is a lot of work to be done, right? And so if the patient is not ready for that, then we're going to a different type of therapy, which is more like motivational interviewing. So it's like, people who are not
Hmm.
really self-aware yet, and I kind of usually will send them to one of my colleagues, and then when they're ready to actually change something significant, then I would have them come see me. But that would not last 10 years, right? So that would last maybe like 12 to 24 sessions, right? And then if we're done with that, then we're very focused and we would start on a new goal.
Mm, that makes sense. Okay, I'm hoping to be honest with this, that this is my last question on
No
this,
worries,
because I
Nolan.
still want to talk real quick of more of other things, but I think I'm just trying to think of other parents and what they would want to know. And I think probably a common question that most of us parents have when it comes to being sensitive to our children's mental health is, and dealing with teenagers here, um how much is it, oh, I need to be sensitive to my child and maybe there's a mental health issue, or they're teens, this is
Right,
normal, like they're
right.
gonna be moody, and like, how do you know and juggle between the two? Because that's what has been the most difficult, is if I am not sensitive to it being a mental health issue and I chalk it up to just, this is just teenage years, I might be not giving crucial support if it is a mental health issue. And then on the other end, am I being overly sensitive to just a normal teenage behavior and making a bigger problem out of something that's not there? Like, what do you have to say that could help someone like me with that issue?
Yeah, and me too. I think, yes, all teenagers, maybe not all, right? There's probably some perfect teenagers out there, but I think for the most part, teenagers are going through a lot of independence issues and like autonomy issues and like trying to break away, right, from the parents and trying to build their self-esteem. And so they are for the first time dealing with, right, like mean people and um, people really disagreeing with who they are as a person, or they might be just really challenged with, I want to go out with my friends and you're not allowing me to, right? So I think all of those types of things are common and we can expect that type of behavior from teenagers and them speaking out more about what they want or how they see things. All of that is normal. I think to distinguish when it's a mental health disorder is when it starts impacting really important aspects of their life, right? So if it starts to impact their functioning or their
Mm,
hygiene, like say your kids maybe like not taking a shower anymore, or they are not able to go to school. So important things in their life and it's
yeah,
impacting that functioning. That's when I would really make sure to go see a professional.
that makes sense. Okay. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Okay. as I promised, I'm gonna jump off of this subject because I really do. I'm fascinated to learn more about you, just because I know so much about your profession and the work you do. But I was curious. You mentioned that the things that you went through in high school that led you to inspired you to do what you're doing now. But were there is there some other things that you enjoyed and were passionate about that kind of maybe people might not know about you, or like secret you know talents? Like, are you like closet karaoke professional singer?
No, I'm not. I'm not a karaoke singer, but I think I have had a passion for suicide prevention. I think for a long time, and that does stem from me losing one of my really good friends to suicide. And so I was able to work at the VA for a few years. Our veterans have a very high suicide rate, and I think that has, like, looking back, right? It's kind of like the stars aligned for you. And um, I think that this work and being able to work with people who are in crisis, people who are at a really dark place, it's hard work and it's tough, and I'm not just saying hard work like as in it's laborious. I mean, it's a place where you have to be with that person and see them and be like in that darkness with them. And so I don't think a lot of people would want to do that, or I don't think a lot of people could do that. And so I do feel really lucky and blessed and honored to see people in their worst moments, because the most rewarding thing for me is to see them come out of that and to see them thrive and to see, because when they realize that they can come back from that, I swear it like unlocks something, and like their potential is unlocked, and they know that if I can get through that, I can get
Mhm.
through anything. And so now I'm going to focus my energy on the things that I want to do instead of what the world expects of me, right? Or what my parents expect of me. And that, I think, has been extremely rewarding. And I do think that if I didn't have the experience from the VA and all of that, I probably wouldn't be as effective as I am today with teens who are in crisis. I
Mm.
also, in LA, I worked for, and this was in my early 20s, right? I'm 40 now, but
Holy
I was,
smokes, you're
yeah,
even older than I thought you were. It's incredible. Sorry, not to no.
Nolan, gosh,
No,
but
no,
you're
no.
so
I'm
old.
just saying you look so much.
Thank
I'm just
you.
blown away. Both you and your husband. It's just like I can't understand this. It
It's
just makes
so
no sense
funny.
to me.
No, no, but I was, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought because you just were like,
Sorry.
you're so old, Halen. No, but I think what I was saying is that I think that that work experience has kind of like prepped me for today, right? Or has
Hmm.
even prepped me for my child. Like that was shocking for me. Like I was not ready for my child to be trans, right? And so I
Yeah.
think just understanding it really has prepped me. And this is what I was going to say, when I was in LA, they have a crisis mobile response team where it's not like the regular 911 dispatch. Like, it's a special kind of unit where LAPD and then social workers and mental health specialists, they partner up to go to the call. And when I saw that almost 20 years ago, I realized that that's something like that is the way that we should be treating people with mental illness, right? We
Yeah.
shouldn't just be like arresting them and locking them up, right? We should be being able to connect them with resources and actually see them as actual people, and
Yeah.
then take a trauma informed lens. And even in California, they have separate emergency rooms specifically for mental health, right? Because even during the pandemic, this is something that I saw. I wish that Hawaii had that, or I hope to see that in the future, because during the pandemic, all the kids were waiting in the regular ERs. We don't have like special ERs for mental health, but what we do have is inpatient psychiatric facilities. And one is Family Treatment Center at Queens, and one is Kahimahala. And during the pandemic, those two inpatient facilities were completely booked, and there were months waiting lists. And so
Oh no.
these are not just like regular therapy, right? Like those facilities are for people or kids who are actively suicidal. And I think it was so heartbreaking to know that the sickest of the sickest kids who were at highest risk for suicide, they were not being serviced just
Mhm.
because of the lack of resources we have here. And so all of that to say, I know we have a lot of work to do, but I'm definitely here for it. And I'm hoping that um, in 20 years or something that we will have those kind of services that would really help a lot of the kids that we see here at Spill the Tea.
So, in the hour or so that I've talked to you, it's quite obvious to me that your whole brain is just inundated with all of this work that you have to do and in making our community and our world and our children, everybody feel supported in mental health and getting the resources and improving things. And then I keep going back to, but then you also have four children that you're raising. So uh, how do you ever like, because that's two totally different worlds, it seems like,
Right.
like two different brain functions. uh how do you function? Are you okay?
Yeah, I think, it's important for me to, like I said, practice what I preach and make sure that I am aware of, my own mental health. And yes, it can be extremely overwhelming to start a business. The
Yeah.
first 3 years are extremely hard. And my 7-year old, he's so funny, Morgan, he goes around telling people we have a gay cafe. And I said, Morgan, we don't have a gay cafe. Okay. Like, stop telling everyone we have a gay cafe. But, I think the kids do see what I'm doing. They're here a lot. And then also, I do want to speak on the invisible workload of mothers, right? So
Yeah.
although I have a lot of help, meaning my husband is amazing, my parents help out, right? We've had to hire help, right, for babysitting and things like that. But I do think that I still carry most of the coordination in my head and making sure that this is delegated out, and that, the sports and all of that. I think what's important for me to realize is that I'm doing enough and that
Hmm.
I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to try to pretend like I have it all. I I feel like I do have it all, but I can't do it all. Right? So
Gotcha.
you can have it all, but you can't do it all. So I have to be
Yeah.
very intentional with my time and my calendar. If you saw it, you would probably think I'm not okay.
I
But
know.
I do but I do make sure, right, for myself, that I prioritize the well-being of my children. I'm not going to miss something that's important. Like on Thursday, my 4-year-old has a performance. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's when mom picks up the kids, right? So I have to make sure that my time is spent intentionally. And yes, it's very tough.
What is the one thing that you do for yourself, um whether it's like yoga or I don't know, wine? Like, what is the
Yeah.
what is the one thing that you're like, this is like something that really is a game, an MVP for my personal like mental health?
Yeah, I feel like you want a really good, amazing, sparkly answer, but I literally really love to just, after the kids go to sleep, like watch Netflix with my husband. I also, will make sure that I take a girls trip every year, and I definitely get judgment from well, back before. Now my mom and grandma, they're like all for it, and I love them. They're so supportive of it. But ever since I'll get a lot of judgment for that. But I think that,
Like what was their
well,
judgment?
just because, like, why are you guys like taking a trip without your kids, and how
Ah,
irresponsible of you, right? And how, whatever. And so we don't care, and we go on a trip every year, just the girls. And I think that that is so fun. We look forward to it, and it again, it speaks to that connection, because I think it's so much more fulfilling to live this life with people that you care about. And I unfortunately have a lot of millionaire, multimillionaire clients, right? And a lot of them are miserable because they don't
mhm,
have healthy relationships. And so that's
yeah.
something that I don't envy, and I would never wish for something like that.
So when you go on these girls trips, how many girls are there on this? Like
There's
how many of
usually
you are there?
5 and one
Okay, so that's
boy,
decent.
one girly boy.
Okay. Yeah, because if it's a lot, I can imagine that's a lot to coordinate, and then that's more, you're adding to the stress versus helping with the stress, right? But
No,
five
it's
is
so much
doable,
fun.
right?
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
much fun. What else do
Where?
I do? I try to work out, maybe once a week, but definitely meditation before bed. And I
Mm,
just do the one that you play. I think it's really
yeah, yeah, yeah.
helpful. And so I wasn't really ever into meditation, but I understand what it's supposed to do, right? It's supposed to allow
Yeah.
you to uh, come out of those spiraling thoughts and refocus so that you're not getting taken over by those thoughts. So I definitely do that at bedtime as well.
When you said that you watch Netflix with your husband, what type of do you guys agree? Do you guys have the same type of tastes in shows, or is it a constant like trade off of okay, we
It's
watch
kind of
this
like a
type?
trade.
Oh, it
Yeah, it's kind
is.
of like a trade. It's kind of like a trade off, but we do both really like stand up comedy, and then we
Okay.
both. Oh, actually, I didn't wait for Alex. I was supposed to wait for him, but he fell asleep, and I watched Beef with Ali Wong.
I hear everybody's watching it and raving about it. What do you think about it? I haven't watched it yet.
It's definitely what I did not expect it to be all that because Ali Wong is usually just super funny and all that, so it's
Right.
definitely a piece of art for sure.
Mm. So what is the type of so aside from stand-up comedy, what are the types of shows that you like that you have to make deals with Alex in order for him to agree to watch those with you?
Um, I mean, I think usually we're pretty much like watching stand up and like I don't have sometimes to be honest with you, Nolan, I like come home and after the kids are um sleeping, I sometimes will just fall asleep too.
Oh,
Like during the yeah, so
understandable.
I'm
Very
definitely
understandable.
guilty of that too.
Well, I know you got quite a busy schedule ahead of you, so I want to let you go. But before you do, where's the next destination for the next girls' trip? Have you guys figured it out yet?
I think we are going this is some I swear we never go to Vegas, but we are going to Vegas the next girls trip for someone's 40th birthday.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just glad that you guys are all coming into my decade of life. Now I feel a little bit of camaraderie now. Like I'm not so alone in this
Awesome,
in this
Nolan.
in
Thank
this
you so
age.
much. Yeah, no, I think we're doing okay. I think you and I are doing
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I really, really appreciate you taking time out to, as we all know, just how crazy your schedule is. But for you to still be willing to jump on here and hang out with me, and just be such a open book and a resource for not only myself, but I know there's tons of other people out there that really needed this, and it's gonna make a big difference. Not only what you shared, but the kind of work that you're doing for us and whatever we can do to help you and in the work you're doing, I'd love to be a part of that. So, how can people either learn more about Spill the Tea Cafe or your services, or support you in the projects that you have out there right now?
Thanks so much, Nolan. I really appreciate that. I You can reach us at our website, spilltheteacafe.org. We are a 501c3, and so if you would like to donate, we would love to accept your donation of either a monetary gift and or snacks. So we do provide free snacks, cup of noodles, chips, juice, things like that. We give out free boba, and then also art supplies. If people want to donate art supplies, we give all therapy for free here. And so
Oh wow.
what that means is if you don't have insurance or insurance doesn't cover it, we still will go ahead and service the teenager. So if you have anyone that you know of that is a teenager who may be struggling, please let them know about us. You can also follow us on Instagram at Spill the Tea Cafe. It's spill underscore the tea cafe. Also, if you know any physicians or med students who would like therapy, I am really also passionate about changing the medical system and the
Mm,
curriculum there. So if you know any
yeah.
physicians, you can go to haylindennison.com or follow me on Instagram at Haylin Dennison LCSW.
Real quick, how many times have you had parents who are not hip to the lingo think that spill the tea cafe means that you guys just like spilt like you guys don't clean up and stuff?
Right. Yeah. Like I think every day.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that answer.
Yeah. Or like,
That's,
people think it is just the cafe. So when they
yeah,
kind of realize it's more also like a teen wellness center, then but I love it. And I think it does, um, we definitely market specifically to the teenagers. And so I
yeah.
think that it's really special for them.
Well, I'll know now who to go to kind of be my translator for the youth lingo because
Okay.
I think you're all around it, so you would know. Because there's
Yeah.
so many times when like the kids come home and they say stuff, and I'm like, I used to think that I was up to date and I'm pretty hip to everything, and then now it's like I no idea what you guys are
Yeah.
talking
They
about.
have a whole new language. They do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Haylin, thank you so much. I'm so glad I finally got to meet you, and I'm really looking forward to all of the things that you're doing, and would love to be a part of helping you do all this incredible work for our kids. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Nolan. I appreciate you.